Okay, but while we're waiting, this is a celebration, right? Yes, so let's give a round of applause again to our keynote speaker and this event. And while we're waiting for our panelists to come up, I want to see who you all are so we have a better sense of our audience and participants. So, how many of you are teachers in an immersion program? Raise your hand if you're a teacher now or have been a teacher in the past. Okay, very good. How many of you are parents in the immersion program? Wonderful. How many of you are administrators? Thank you for supporting the program. How many of you are collaborators who collaborated in the past with an immersion program? We need collaborators and partners. We want to thank all of you for coming today. We are a small but mighty group. And we are, as Tara Fortune said, the future of immersion and two-way immersion program. My name is Magaly Lavadenz. I am Professor and Director of Bilingual Programs at Loyola Marymount University, and I also direct the Center for Equity for English Learners. And I'm very pleased to introduce our panelists here, and we're going to have a great conversation as in a retrospective and also in terms of the future of immersion education in the United States, given what we just heard from our great two opening speakers. So I'm going to do a very brief introduction, but I think what the important thing to accomplish in our panel is really for them to have a reflection, to share with you, and then we'll have some opportunities, about 15 minutes worth of opportunities to have an exchange, a Q&A at the end. And as Madeline was saying, we're going to go till 3:15, right? Yeah. Is that right? Okay, great. So, to my left here is Andrew Cohen. Professor Cohen is a professor of second language studies in the Department of Writing at the University of Minnesota. He has been one of the collaborators and researchers in this program here in Culver City since its inception. That was 40 years ago, right? Even though he doesn't look it, right? He looks fresh and young like we all do after 40 years worth of work. And he will be sharing some insights with you in terms of his experiences in working this. And he's also closely affiliated with CARLA. And to his left is Tara Fortune, whom you just heard from. Next to her is Alice Horiba. Alice is one of the teachers in the Japanese immersion program here in Culver City. Alice also, I have to say this, I have to brag, she was my student. She did an MA in TESOL a few years back ago at LNU, and she's the practitioner, one of the two practitioners in our panel today. To her left, James Orihuela, who is middle school teacher at Patrick Henry in Long Beach, and he has been Teacher of the Year for two-way CABE. And our two teacher panels represent the two languages here in Culver City, and we're really glad to have them. And at the very end of our panel is Tracy Pumilia, who is the current principal of El Marino Language Academy here in Culver City. And let's give them all a round of applause. I'm going to go in order of the panel, so I'll turn to you, Andrew, first.
Great. It's a real pleasure being here. There are several people who remember me from those early years. I started at UCLA in '72, so actually the program was ongoing a year. But Wally Lambert visited, when I was a graduate student doing my doctorate at Stanford back in the late '60s, Wally came and gave a talk about immersion. At the time, a lot of us scratched our heads. It was like the Wright brothers talking about flying or something. It just seemed so weird. And it's not so surprising that school districts like the LA school district, you know, what was opposed. And you should know that when we started the Culver City program, the first kindergarten group got English reading in first grade along with Spanish reading because there was so much worry in the Culver City district at the time that, God forbid, these kids should be denied access. You remember, wouldn't you? For 2 full years. I mean, outrageous. So they started English reading. And when you know the kids, it affected negatively the reading in Spanish. Kids were saying hi instead of I when they saw the H of H-A-Y. Things like that. They would say hi. And so guess what? The next year then, they let there be 2 years of straight Spanish without the introduction of English. But also some of the other things, some of those principles from the St. Lambert School were taken right to the letter, like that the kids should not know that their teachers could speak English. So within earshot of the kids, they absolutely use Spanish. So if a parent came to the door, the kid would have to translate, or the parent would have to not be so clear, because the teacher would only speak in Spanish to the parent. So we did some exciting things those early years, and I think they really provided the kind of guidance and the kind of models that I think carried forward. At our last reunion that I attended, the 25th reunion, Michelle Barbazel was there. She'll be speaking at a panel later this afternoon. Is Michelle here now? No, not yet. She's coming. One of the teachers passed by, then her third grade teacher. We spoke in English, and she said, wow, that's the first time I've ever heard her use English. To give you an idea, this is that many years later. So they really stuck to their guides. It was an interesting thing. There was a concern that, I should say this, that in those early years, it was thought that being bilingual was a liability. When Wally Lambert came to Stanford and spoke to us about immersion, you have to remember that the literature that was rife then was literature talking about the deficits, the cognitive deficits of being bilingual. And he and Elizabeth Peel did a study in the 60s that demonstrated it wasn't true. And it's wonderful, when you heard Tara speak before, it's wonderful to see the paradigm has shifted not to a bilingual paradigm, which was then the paradigm, but to a multilingual paradigm. Why not? And one of the things that's kept me youthful is I use a lot of languages. I'm now working on Mandarin. It's my 12th after English. And with our kids, I want to say a couple words about immersion. I agree it is the best thing we have going in America. But as Tara demonstrated with her one slide, the kids learn a pidgin. And it gets a little worrisome. My last really in-depth look at it was the Spanish immersion program at the Adams School in St. Paul. I noticed that, and there were very limited numbers of Spanish speakers who were native at that time. There were like 3 in the class. One of them gets off the cell phone to her daughter, to her mother. She's speaking fluent Spanish. She gets off the cell phone, and she goes back to speaking the pidgin because it's the preferred dialect. So we are creating something that is not necessarily local. And as Tara said, she's very concerned about these sociolinguistic, I would consider pragmatic aspects. Are we creating a language which is Spanish, let's say, but with an American pragmatic overlay? So we're using Spanish, but we're thinking pragmatically, we're thinking socially or sociolinguistically in English. And I would probably say we are. What my wife and I did is we just went and lived in Israel for 17 years. Our daughter was 2 when we got there. Our son was born there. And they are really comfortable Hebrew speakers. They're back in America now. But pragmatically, our daughter, after coming back, became a heritage speaker of Hebrew. She didn't go back for 8 years. When she went back, she was told by her Israeli friends that she was too polite. You apologize too much. So, I mean, these issues are going to be there. They're going to be there for immersion. In my second session, our second panel, I'm going to be speaking about research that I did in St. Paul on trying to get kids to be more academically proficient. I think that's a real challenge with immersion. That by the time they reach puberty, it's not so cool to be doing the language, and out of earshot of the teacher, they're doing a lot of languaging in English. And Tara's found that too in her work. So this is another challenge, to keep them being academically engaged in a language. And there can be a deficit. When our son came from Israel to America, he was in 8th grade. My wife had to sit there with him with his history book and his science book because he didn't know how to do academic language in English. That can be a problem if you're really not immersed, submersed in a language. That's the advantage of an immersion model, actually. Maybe it's somewhat of a pidgin, but you're keeping the 2 languages going, academically.